What's up again, everybody? It's been a little while since our last go-around, so let's jump in and look at 3 more characters. Here we have Gamora, and we know all 3 of Gamora's rarities. Let's take a look at the common version first. The common version is a 3-cost fist character with that Guardians affiliation, a 1-3-3-2-4-3-2-4-5 stat line, and the ability reads, while your opponent has any active villain character dice, Gamora gets +1 attack and must attack if able. So for a 3-cost, you're naturally getting a die with above average stats, with the trade-off being the expensive fielding cost. If she's cycling multiple times a game, then you're losing tempo over time by having to pay the 2 to field each Gamora die every time she comes back around. But the threat of 4 damage per die is nothing to scoff at. With an opposing villain in the field, you're getting an even better stat line, and the stipulation of having to attack isn't always bad. If you're behind on board, then yeah, it can be pretty bad, as you'd rather have the board presence than the 5 damage that Gamora would deal because she's being forced to attack. Outside of being a beat stick, she doesn't do a ton to push forward the Guardians team within the constructed meta, but this does feel like a decent draft pick on a team centered around aggro and being ahead on the board. So while I could see this being picked up in draft, I don't think this makes the cut on an 8-card team. The uncommon version of Gamora is a 4-cost fist character with a Guardians affiliation, and an ability that reads, when fielded, if you purchase a different Guardians character die this turn, add it to your bag, and if it's on the burst face, if she's on the burst face, then it says, instead add it to your prep area. This has a lot of potential in draft, as there are a ton of Guardians characters in this set, rightfully so, and so picking this up in a draft makes a ton of sense because you can work around the when fielded effect by drafting other low-cost Guardians characters. At which point this card basically becomes ramp, because your purchases skip over the used pile step, move either into the bag or over to prep, which is what you really want, especially in draft, where the game is a lot slower. As far as constructed goes, it's hard to justify using this card on an 8-card team, even with all the Guardian synergies that you could put around it in a constructed setting, simply because there are just faster options within the constructed meta. Therefore, I don't see this making the cut onto a Guardians team. The rare Gamora is also a 4-cost fist character. Her ability says Infiltrate, and on the burst face, when this die uses Infiltrate, deal an additional damage. I've mentioned before that my first impressions when playing with this Infiltrate keyword were less than stellar, and as I've given it more thought, I acknowledge all of the good things that Infiltrate can conceivably do. It guarantees your board state will stay the same even if your opponent leaves this die unblocked. It seems to work well on low-cost characters, as you can conceivably swarm them out and win the board. However, if you don't have the board, or if your opponent has more valuable characters than you out in the field, then this character with Infiltrate, or really any character with Infiltrate, is essentially a blank text card. And with that in mind, if we're to employ something like range analysis when thinking of this card, then we'd have, at worst, a blank text card for 4 with an average stat line and expensive total fielding cost, and at best we'd have a card that you can attack with every turn and are nearly guaranteed to KO a character or to deal a damage. The range doesn't trend high enough for me to warrant picking this up in draft outside of the fact that it's a rare card, and unless I'm hugely undervaluing Infiltrate as a keyword, I don't see this making constructed teams. On we move to Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider is a 4-cost mask character with the Marvel Knights affiliation, an 0-2-3-1-3-4-2-5-5 stat line, and the common version says, while Ghost Rider is active during your clear and draw step, if Ghost Rider is your only character in the field zone, draw an extra die. So this ability could conceivably trigger a few times during a game, allowing you to draw 5 dice instead of 4, and that's pretty good. Now the stipulation to actually trigger this ability is pretty bad. This being your only die in the field means you're pretty wide open to a lot of aggro attacks. Opening yourself to taking a lot of damage for the promise of rolling 1 die extra next turn seems too weak to run in just about any format. The only time I see this being particularly good is if this is your first or your second turn buy and you roll it turn 3 and you put it out there and you haven't rolled any sidekicks and your opponent hasn't pressured you at all, so therefore you could get the 1 die benefit next turn without taking a ton of damage if you buy this early. And really only in that sense do I see this being something you should go for in a draft scenario, because it's otherwise just a 4-cost sort of average statted guy. The uncommon Ghost Rider is also a 4-cost mask character with that Marvel Knights affiliation, and this one says, if Ghost Rider is your only character die in the field zone, you may block 2 character dice with him. This ability makes a lot more sense for a card that features the trigger of being the only character die in the field zone. So I think this one works a lot more than the common version does, and you can pick this up in draft and buy it early, and he becomes really 2 characters when blocking. I think this is definitely worth picking up in a draft, and I would do so if I get the chance. As for uses in Constructed, I don't think either of these cards see a ton of use in Constructed just because Marvel Knights affiliation doesn't do much. These cards by themselves really only work by themselves. They don't synergize well with anything really powerful in particular. If either of these were to make a Constructed level team, it would be the uncommon because that ability has been seen on other cards before without the stipulation that they have to be the only die in the field zone. The double blocking thing is actually pretty powerful when you use it, so if one of these makes a team, it would probably be that one. Last but not least, we have Groot showing up in this set. We know of the common and uncommon versions so far, and both of those are 4-cost shield characters with that Guardians affiliation. An 012, 126, 237 stat line, and the top 2 faces are burst faces. The common Groot's ability says, while Groot is active, your Guardian character dice cannot be targeted by global abilities or action dice, and he has a global that says pay 2 shields, gain 1 life, use this ability only once per turn. To me, this is a generally great card. Adding an affiliation-specific protection card goes a long way towards pushing the archetype forward in the competitive realm, that is the Guardians archetype. It doesn't really provide full protection, as your Guardians can still be targeted by character abilities, but anything is better than nothing. The global is also nice, though it won't be often used. At maximum, you can spend 4 shields, 2 on your turn and 2 on your opponent's turn, to gain 2 life, and unless you're in a bind or are hurting for life, I don't see that coming into play very often. That being said, I love life gain mechanics, and I would love to see more of them rise to the forefront, as it could add a new layer of strategy to the game. As for draft, this does have some value, as you're going to have access to a full selection of Guardians, and Groot will protect them from inset or basic action card globals, as well as action dice. It won't protect from character abilities, which you will see a lot in draft, so it certainly isn't a world beater, but it's worth picking up. The uncommon Groot's ability reads, while Groot is active, the first time damage is dealt to you each turn, reduce that damage by 1, and when it is on the burst face, when that dies on its burst face, instead reduce that damage by 2. This version of Groot has a lot going for it. In addition to the great defending stat line, you get a damage reduction effect of 2 on 66% of the times you roll character faces. This allows you to select what characters you'd like to leave unblocked, and then reduce the damage from that one source. And there's this interesting combo between this and the Bane Global from World's Finest that forces a die to attack, in that you can taunt out a higher value character, take the damage by leaving it unblocked, reduce the damage by 1 or by 2, and even perhaps pay for the Groot Global to heal a bit further. The value of this card remains high in draft, where the stat line and the damage mitigation is really great, and I think this could see play in a variety of teams in Constructed. And here I emphasize the could portion of my last sentence, because I think this does not edge out Ronin in being able to mitigate damage by soaking it up himself, but it's something similar to that, and that sees play a ton as a staple, and so this could start to work its way in. Alright, so 3 characters down and a ton more to go. I'm going to keep plugging away at these. I apologize for not getting this video out as quickly as I'd hoped. Work picking back up with the school year starting for most people means that things slow down on my end, but I'm going to keep trying to pump these things out so that we can get through it. I have some gameplay videos as well that I have edited. I just need to do some commentary over, so hopefully I can get those out as well. As always, guys, leave comments and let me know what you think of these cards, and thanks for watching.